like to make a motion that we begin our meeting of the advisory board this Tuesday, July 22nd. Do I have a second?
Second.
Right, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Okay. Okay. Before we get going, can somebody volunteer to take minutes?
Well, I can take notes.
We're going to be voting on a new, or notes, yeah,
Sure.
we can turn in minutes. Okay, cool, great. Shall we do the Pledge of Allegiance? Sure. Pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, so on the agenda for tonight is that we're going to go through year-end transfers. And I noticed we already have the transfer request sitting in front of us, so make sure we pull a copy of that on. We're also going to review and discuss the fiscal year 27 funding challenges and opportunities. So obviously we're going into fiscal year 26. But fiscal year 27 is the next budgetary year that we're going to be reviewing here coming up in only a matter of a few months. And then part of that will not just be talking about the challenges and the opportunities in front of the town and that the advisory board will need to support, but it's also the budget process, right? And we had made some recommendations back to the select board, I believe it was back in March of this year. And that was pertaining to the process that we had just gone through and what we believe would be some improvements. And I know that Mr. Moran, who's here tonight, and both Sean and Meg have given thoughts to those, so curious to hear their thoughts this evening as we look at moving forward. We'll also, something to everybody should put on their calendars is that I believe it's October 20th or October 17th is the town meeting, annual town meeting. Anybody know that off the top of your head? Is it the 20th? Okay. So the warrant is going out any day now, if I recall correctly, and then it's going to be due back sometime in August. And then so I would think that sometime in September, we'll probably early September, we'll probably get the warrant articles from Peter, at least the initial draft, and then we'll need to begin our work before that town meeting. So anyways, that'll be coming up. That's going to obviously be a difference versus last year. Remember last year special town meeting wasn't until December. So we kind of very slowly moved our way into the beginning of the new fiscal year because there wasn't moving very quickly, but this year will be different.
Did we not have a meeting in October? Did we have a meeting and then have a, no, that was April and June.
Yeah, correct.
Okay, all right.
Yeah. Our last year, our meeting was right. It was right before the Christmas holiday.
Okay.
Yeah, and then we had started. I think our first advisory board meeting was back in like late October or something. So yeah, but this year we'll have to obviously start. Yeah, start early, and we'll also I'll be sending out some proposed dates soon to also get together in August, so that way we can come together. Probably a very brief meeting, but just doing some general administrative housekeeping things like, items, sort of like, getting meeting minutes approved and looking at the calendar for the rest of this calendar year, and things of that sort. So anyways, okay. Wanted to move on to discussion and the votes on year-end transfers. We have the town with us today, Mr. Moran's team, so who would be able to walk us through what the request is this year?
I'll just do a perfunctory introduction and explanation, just because apparently it's not clear to everyone in town government that what the process is that we're going through tonight. These are all reserve fund transfers, and if you recall, item number 25 in Article 6 of the special town meeting appropriated $900,000 into this reserve fund. This reserve fund is for unforeseen or emergency expenditures, and is created pursuant to Mass General Law, Chapter 40, Section 6. It is customary for every municipality that I have ever worked in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, and there's a lot of them now, to do this exercise at the end of the fiscal year, to close the books. It is one step in closing the books.
Peter, when you said the end in June or July?
This is the end of the FY25. So usually, you know, a finance committee or an advisory board will meet in July or August, and sometimes several times, to do the year-end transfers.
Okay.
So this is,
When you said about year-end, I meant
Yeah.
before 2016.
no.
Okay.
So this was done in special town meetings so that the funds could be appropriated or could be expended in the FY25 fiscal year, or for expenses incurred in the FY25 fiscal year. So this is not unusual. My first meeting in April with department heads, Sean identified a probable amount of $900,000 that would be needed to close this gap. And we're in that ballpark this evening. And so I think and there are also, when you look at accounts and have a look at the accounts, there are positive balances in a number of accounts as well. So you're going to have an operational surplus at the end of the year. So you're in good shape, and there was discipline by departments in closing out this year. And that's a compliment to the town. So with that, Meg, if you want to go through these.
Can you just back up for a second, Peter, because we do have some new people on the board that have joined in the last several months. Can you go back to a super high level and just help walk us through exactly what this process is and the reason for it, so that way both new folks here and anybody that's watching this later on understands because to your point, there is some misunderstandings of exactly what the purpose of the process is, so maybe we can just walk through.
So inherent in any budgetary process is you're predicting the future. You're trying to identify earlier in your year or prior to the beginning of your fiscal year what your numbers are going to be for each account. Okay, there will be unforeseen circumstances. There'll be changes in costs, emergent conditions. You know, the primary example of this is snow and ice. You put some money aside every year for snow and ice, but nobody, it's you know, only recently with some of the warmer winters have you seen surpluses in those accounts. Generally, you're supplementing them at the end of the fiscal year because you don't know how many inches of snow that you're going to get, what the cost of road salt is going to be, how much brine you're going to use, whether your vehicles are going to need repairs or welding to fix a plow, all this other stuff that happens. So what the Commonwealth allows cities and towns to do under Chapter 40, Section 6, and Chapter 40, Section 5A, I believe, for cities, is establish a reserve fund, which puts aside an amount of money to meet the unforeseen circumstances. And you can transfer money into that and transfer money out of that and into various accounts during the course of the fiscal year. The advisory board, by that statute, is authorized to make those transfers. Now, ultimately, as with every expenditure on the non-school side of town, the warrants are signed by the select board. So the actual expenditures are approved by the select board, but the transfers into the accounts that allows for those expenditures is done by this board. I hope that's not too confusing. You know, that's where we are.
So, yeah, using Grok, I just looked up you know, what is a reserve fund in the Mass law, and like you said, Chapter 40, Section 6, it says authorizes towns to establish a reserve fund to provide for extraordinary or unforeseen expenditures. And that's not exactly what you said, or at least not what's printed here. I see a lot of things labeled salaries.
So on this one though, because what you originally started off with in the reserve fund was 100,000, that was reserved for
Emergencies.
The additional 900,000 appropriated at town meeting was, I believe it discussed at town meeting as intended to be a place for any year-end deficits that were going to need to be addressed. So the original 100,000, yes, you could say was for unforeseen, but the other 900,000 was intended for this type of activity.
More activity that's operational. Yeah, okay.
Okay.
Can I ask a quick question?
Sure.
Just for context, what was the amount needed last year for this? Do you guys have any idea?
I can try to-
I mean, the reason I'm asking is just to show how consistent pretty
Yeah.
much this is, like how it's something that
It's foreseeable.
pretty foreseeable, and the snow and ice is definitely a perfect example, because I can't tell you how many years in town I've seen that snow and ice almost always goes over budget, and you just don't know. I mean, some years, it's been less lately because we just haven't had crazy winters, but in the past, I mean,
Yeah,
so
2015 was.
yeah. So that's a perfect example, and you just don't know, it's a moving target, I guess that's the right word. But
I feel like we've gone, snow and ice has gone over just about every year, since at least I've been on.
But, Meg, didn't we have a conversation, not to, well,
Yeah.
too much on stone, but
No.
isn't there a good reason to deficit on, we always
Because
make
once you appropriate to a certain level in snow and ice, you're obligated by the Commonwealth to appropriate at
Yeah.
that same level the next year, even if you don't hit it.
Ah,
So and you're allowed to deficit spend, and that's one of the rare areas that you are allowed to deficit spend in, under, state government. So it's better to, it encourages you per se to underfund it, because you can even carry it over into a subsequent fiscal year, which I do not recommend, but you can do it if you have to.
okay. But if we added $1 million versus 400, we only spent 400, that 600 would be operating surplus.
But then you would have to appropriate $1 million the following year, or you wouldn't be able to deficit spend.
Right. You'd have to keep at that 1 million.
Okay.
Yeah. So what I always try to do is close the gap a little bit each year, so you add to it, probably commensurate with the growth in your budget, but not to the point that you're covering it dollar for dollar.
That's a good point. We kept it at 400 for 5 or 6 years that I know.
So should it be going up then by, what is it, what is the general budget this year?
When you get to your budget in FY '27, you want to look at that, if you can do it.
So I get snow and ice, and I could even go fuel, is another expenditure that is out of control. But these other things that are listed here, why are we so under or overspent on these areas? What did we do wrong? Do we know what we did wrong in fiscal year '25 that we have these kind of gaps?
I mean, I can start with an overview, if that will.
Yeah, let's do maybe an overview and then maybe pull a couple examples and just walk through them, that would be easy to understand and,
Sure.
yeah.
So, I mean, just to start, because I think the question was thrown out, what did we do for last year? Last year, we didn't do it quite like this. We really did, we looked at all of our deficits and then all of our surplus lines, and then it was just applying. However, it wasn't clean like this is our total deficit. But I will say is, last year, we had expenditure closeout at the end of the year is $442,862. This year it is, very small print, I apologize, it should be that bottom line much larger, $2,794,732. So more than $2 million more in closeouts this year. So, and that closes out to your free cash. So that's, it's good news, cool, really, our free cash. In terms of the overview, so
Meaning, just so everybody's clear, when you're moving it to free cash, it's because you underspent in those areas. Operationally, it means that your operations were carried forth in such a way that you ended up underspending, so you had additional funds left at the end of the year that you're able to move into free cash.
Yes.
And we discussed this, in fact, at the very last advisory board meeting. It was the joint advisory board, select board meeting on whether or not that's a good practice. And because there's concerns that that's not a good practice, that we need to be much more, much smaller. But in fact, as we reviewed with Mr. Moore, and that is not just standard practice, but good practice when it comes to budgeting like this, because the alternative is that you wind up overspent, which creates a problem of some pretty significant proportions.
And we did have a bond rating call recently, and they were asking those kinds of questions, well, how was your free cash derived? You know, so last year it was primarily driven by revenue closeouts. This year it'll be revenues in excess of projections.
Yeah.
This year it'll be a combination of revenues in excess of projections as well as expenditure closeouts. Because there was a lot of, I feel like there was a lot of fiscal responsibility with departments this year, because you know, we had conversations early about spending and trends and percentages, and I think department heads really, you know, took that to heart, and they really tried to make sure that they were responsible with their budgets. You know, but to that point, I mean, I guess the question becomes, you know, you have to start looking at best practices and percentages. What should we be looking at for a quarter? Because squeaking by is not good, having a huge surplus isn't good. You know, there's got to be some happy medium, because you know, that usually comes from just like kind of looking and saying, okay, what percentage of the budget should we be generating in free cash? And then that kind of falls from there. But in terms of like, I mean, I did provide explanations for a bunch of them. You know, we had some salaries, we had some buyouts, we had some contract settlements and retros.
The legal expenses was the fire chief issue?
The legal services was, I think, a combination of MBTA and fire.
In Holtec.
And Holtec.
Oh, for the sewage treatment?
No, Holtec is the
Oh,
EOC, it's the monitoring of the decommissioned
Oh, Pilgrim.
Pilgrim.
We also, I mean, like utilities was over quite a bit, but that's because of, you know,
Yeah.
rising rates. Yeah, I guess, I mean, I don't know if it would be better to maybe just start with some questions, because I could go through line by line to give an explanation, or if you.
No, what I was thinking, it makes sense to first go over high level, which you've just done, but maybe pick a few examples to literally cite how this works, so that way then we can go through and everybody understands how it works, and then we can go through and ask any specific questions on these individual line items.
Sure.
That makes sense. So I don't know if you want to just pick an easy example, something to.
Okay, so, you know, suppose, well, I'll start with one. So the assessor expenses, that's over budget. And that was because it was a budget that was set, and the contract for cyclical data verification had expired. So in going out to, you know, get quotes for a new service, the vendor that was selected was actually the lowest quote that was received, but it was more than what was in the budget. So, you know, what our goal would be to go forward. Obviously, we're looking to get a procurement director, but additionally, it would be looking at a lot of the contracts that, looking at departmental expenses, determining what contracts are there, and then maybe having departments reach out a little bit earlier to find out what the, you know, increases can be expected, to try to maybe build that in.
So to make it even more simple, where we see the ending balance where there's a negative number with parentheses around it, so that means it's overspent.
It is overspent.
Overspent, and then everything with positive numbers meaning it was underspent.
Correct.
And the net of that, in combination with the existing reserve fund of $1 million, is the 2.8 million.
Yes.
So 2.8 is your ending balance, but you already started with a balance of 1 million.
Right.
Right.
So
it's
if
really
you
1.7
subtracted that out,
million
yeah.
net that actually got applied.
One of the things I would want to point out at this point too is this operational surplus is solely derived from the non-educational accounts. This is not from any school account. So this is roughly half of your operating departments is providing this.
What's the, did the school run a deficit or a surplus?
No, but it's generally not the practice for them once they can keep it in there and move it without having to go through a transfer process under their statute. So generally, it's unusual for schools in any community to provide a surplus to the town.
So starting with the biggest one first, I guess, which is, and you spoke briefly to this, the 184,000 overage on legal expenses being attributed to the MBTA suits that Marshfield's been involved with, as well as fire union negotiations. Do you know how much of that is, if you were to break that, how much of that is related to MBTA? And is there any perspective in terms of forecast going forward on what that looks like? I realize I'm not asking you to speculate on the case or anything else like that, but just...
That I don't have, because what I have in the general ledger right now is just the payments to, the invoices to the vendor doesn't have the breakdown in it.
Okay.
I can get that information, I can follow up with that information.
Okay.
So what you've got coming up, though, I can give you a general idea, is you've got an appellate brief that the town would be filing on the MBTA if they decide to continue to pursue that venue or that avenue. You had a Superior Court briefing previously and a lot of other activity as well, I think. So I think it's winding down. Your
Okay.
expenses aren't going to be as pronounced as they were this fiscal year. They'll be there, but there won't be as much.
As far as the path that the town has available on the current course
Right.
is getting there to the end.
Right.
On the current course, okay.
Why is all the brick wall, I think?
Why are we participating in the whole tech suit? Does anyone know?
Because
Is
there
there a
was-
benefit to the town?
There was a grant that was supposed to be paid annually by Holtec, and that grant actually funds the EMA or the EOC that we're sitting in
For
right now.
emergency preparedness?
Correct, going forward, but we haven't been receiving those grant funds.
And so my understanding of the litigation is when the town originally made their deal, they had it grow in a certain percentage year after year, which is unique to this town.
Mhm.
And the question was, is currently whether or not they've ceased operations. They're still licensed, they're still storing. So the town is arguing that they're still operating, even though they're not operating their power plant. They're still operationally licensed. So that's the question. This is a large amount of money that would come to the town if the town prevails.
Holtec still has to maintain their own emergency preparedness
They
organization, correct?
do, and they also have to store,
Yeah,
One
so
second.
that fuel's not going anywhere,
no,
not forever.
nobody wants it.
No. It's safe now, though, trust me, it's good. But, okay, all right, that makes sense. Thank you.
The human resources, this 83,000 that was overspent, that's just a reclass?
Yeah, so if you looked at the org at the bottom, 019125510, you'll see that there's surplus there. So it really, where it had been
Oh,
budgeted,
okay.
it had been
Stop, so-
budgeted there, but really is a position in that human resources department. So we started charging the salary to HR, but the budget's gone in benefits.
46,000 from town clerk's salaries, that's a position that was approved, but it took a while to fill, so it was in the budget, but just, there's no expense because it wasn't filled yet.
Mhm.
What is this 42,000 election salaries, what is that?
So it's a presidential election year, so your costs for,
Right, okay.
are going to increase.
So they probably up their budget every 4 years.
They should, so that becomes like and I think it's a tricky question because.
It is.
You know, because then like, can the budget that particular year take that existing hit? So do you consistently leave it in there? Like, how do you account for that? So it's something that can be considered in the future.
And what is that cost specifically? I mean, the majority of it, is it overtime costs? Is it third parties that we have to bring in, or?
It's mostly employees.
But just
temporary
overtime?
employees,
Yeah,
right?
election workers.
Because there's more.
Oh, okay, got
More
it.
people vote in the federal versus the muni elections.
The other thing is the extension of early voting.
Right, that's correct,
Um,
yeah.
You have an opportunity in state elections to curtail that, or for local elections to curtail.
That's a good point.
Whereas in early voting for federal, there's more coverage. So you may end up with the same number of people voting or a higher percentage, but they're doing it over a longer period of time. So you have to
Got it.
have personnel available to man the polling station.
The utility rates, what are we seem to overspend that almost religiously every year, 101,000. And gas rates they were through the roof earlier this year, everybody knows that. What the 2026 budget was based upon 2025 actuals, or how is that done?
No, so 2026 is based off the average history. So we look at the
Okay.
history of how much we've been spending on utilities, how much it's increasing year over year,
Yeah,
because there has been some fluctuations. Sometimes the rates have dropped based on the negotiation, and then we have to kind of look at it from a perspective of what's the consumption going to be, the kilowatts, and then apply that to the anticipated rate. So we kind of get a sense as to what the utility expense might be. But if the sun goes down earlier than projected, or if it's cloudy and the lights are on, or there's a need for air conditioning because it's super hot, I mean, that drives also the utility consumption as well. So those are the things, environmental factors that sometimes come into play that are hard to predict.
okay. And do we lock in, do we buy natural gas strips or anything like that do we do any kind of programs like that as far as for the town to lock in our expense, or do we just ride the market?
No, I don't think we're riding the market. I do believe we're locked in. I'm not sure for the period of time. That was something that Michael was handling, but I do believe we are locked in, and I think that we probably should, once we have a procurement officer, they'll be able to look to see if there's a better option, or maybe we can hedge the decotherm market and get ahead of any sort of fluctuation in the market. But that's something that I will leave to the procurement person to really kind of bear it out.
Most of the time, municipalities are involved in consortium purchasing with other communities to get volume discounts and things like that, and they'll lock in earlier. That can be at your detriment if there's a fluctuation, say in gasoline.
Yeah.
But the real problem here was the rate that the state approved for natural gas was unanticipated.
It's a nice way of putting it. Yeah. Okay. Police salaries, I didn't see a note next to that. By the way, I gotta tell you,
Sorry,
this is really,
I had to print a bigger printer, which is a bigger paper.
should have brought some different glasses. Police salaries, 259,000, that's actually a surplus, which is quite a bit. Was there a position that wasn't filled, or do you know what that was?
Sean, do you know what was going to be?
I think it was a retirement and a vacancy that they're carrying.
Okay, got it. And then the fire rescue salary, it says its projection was based on 5 firefighters out for 6 weeks, and that the worst case scenario didn't happen. Okay, so we had projected a negative scenario. Okay, so that's just coming back to us. All right. And it was that projection that was done, that was just that's just standard practice in terms of projecting what kind of the worst case may be, or was that based upon some operational information at the time?
Because we don't have a solidified contract currently, we're using a percentage based off an anticipated amount.
Got it.
But beyond that, it's hard to really nail it down.
Okay. Are those highway salaries still vacant? The 2 vacant positions?
I believe that they are in the process of probably moving on those. That's what I believe they told me yesterday.
Moving on as in offers?
No, not even at the stage of offers. I think that they probably will be moving on it.
Oh, got it, okay. Gotcha.
On the snow and ice salaries and expenses, is it, when I mentioned the 400, these two line items, the 400 part of that or not part of that? That we budgeted?
The 400, okay, but this is after, this is going through the 400,000 and then spending above. So the total spending was over 600,000.
So the 400 is made up between the salary and expense. Okay,
Yes,
that's right.
yes,
Okay,
yes.
now I have to look at the budget. Got it.
The cemeteries, trees and greens, that's off by 76,000 as a percentage of the appropriation. That's a pretty big one. What was the miss there? I mean, it was a positive to us, but what was the?
It was in the groundskeeping supplies line. Do you know why?
Because I think what's happening is when they're posting their expenses, we keep telling them to really start to separate out what is associated with turf and turf maintenance and the ball fields versus what's really truly departmental, because we do have another fund. Whereas in the past, it was all getting pooled into the general fund budget and not taking out of the revolving fund for that particular.
Although that one, the spending is pretty much on target for previous years, so I think it's been consistent, so I
So it was a class, what I'm hearing from Sean is there was a classification.
I think it's more that probably the budget needs to be adjusted.
Okay, so it was just overblown in terms of the estimate.
And the other piece is when they collapsed the orgs down, when they collapsed the lines down from SOCRite into this consolidated budget line, I don't think there was much consideration in '24 to adjust that number. And when we looked at '25, I was looking at history, but trying to take multiple accounts and their histories and merge it together into one consolidated account. We just kept that number where it was and just added a percentage just to get us to 25 to see what the history would be, because this history from SOCRite was a combination of a lot of different things. And when you brought that over, it didn't translate very well.
Okay, so this, yeah, I remember going back to the Munis transition in fiscal year 2025's budget. There was a lot of that, especially with the department heads. They were trying to make sense of what was, because of how the chart of accounts had kind of got consolidated in some areas and expanded in others.
And CTG had a lot of little accounts or little expense accounts that were tied to specific operations, and it was all collapsed down or concentrated into one account with a very generic header, and they weren't quite sure where to post or where to actually code those expenses. So it's been a bit of a learning curve. So now that we've got more history and a better understanding, we can start making some tweaks to their budget.
So your granularity is better now.
It's much better. It's
Departments
much
are
better
getting
now.
used to that.
Yeah. It takes about 2 years to really get acclimated to this setup.
The nurse position with the Board of Health, why wasn't that filled? Is that still not filled?
It's still not filled. It's a second part-time position that currently is not really needed.
Okay, so it's not needed and that's why it's not filled. Okay. And is that position still in the 2026 budget?
It is not.
It is not, okay. I seem to remember this discussion. Okay, yeah.
So how about the cemetery trees and greens? I know we already talked about it, but I thought you said that the 76,000 plus has been recurring, and so maybe they should reduce the budget?
Their spending has been basically the same. I was looking at 23, 24, 25.
Yeah, and so just sort of what's the process for remembering to go back and talk with them about adjusting it next time?
I've started a list of the things that I've noted for, to start, like, when we start looking at 27, the things that I've noticed that need to be addressed.
Cool.
Yeah, typically in preparing an operational budget for, going forward, you always look at, trended spending in previous fiscal years, what actual spending was versus appropriation. And if there's recurring surplus, you can make adjustments.
Yeah, that's good.
The veteran services expenses, this is a surplus in benefits, was it?
Just, mainly benefits. That's where it's mostly the surplus is being derived from, yes.
Why wasn't it paid out? Was it because it was over budgeted or because
It was lower, the payments out this year were a decent amount lower than last year. I mean, veterans benefits is another one that you don't want to cut it because that can be variable from year to year, because they can have someone walk in at any time and require benefits, or they could have 3 people walk in at any time.
There's also a lag in reimbursement from the state you get, and that can account for why you have a surplus versus, because you're always like chasing the prior year.
Okay.
But the monthly reimbursements have been less because they've had less individuals coming in for support.
And give me a flavor of when you're talking about the benefits, because there's VA benefits, there's some state benefits, and then there's some town benefits. And which specific town benefits are we talking about?
It could be assistance with housing, it could be fuel assistance, it could be nutritional assistance, it could also be health insurance assistance.
Okay.
I think one thing you also ought to realize that they will remove people from these lists because those agents will go out and when they make visits, there are people applying or be collecting benefits that don't deserve them, and they'll remove them.
Okay.
They're
In
very,
terms of
very
trying to figure out who's on the list that should be
very,
anymore,
very
that sort of thing.
professional and
Good.
excellent.
Okay. All right, so the big ones on the list, it's all the way down at the bottom, is employee benefits and Medicare. So can you help walk us through understanding? I mean, just in total, that's what, 1.1 million-ish? Maybe a little bit, probably almost close to 1.2, yeah.
So with employee benefits, that's the health insurance co-share, that's the 50% co-share that the town elects to, defray the costs of health insurance for employees. So because of the history and the way things were coded, we did have a bit of a blip in '24. So using the 24 average, that's what drove the 25 number. And I think we had adjusted that in 26 because of that variance, because there were 13 periods that were posted in one fiscal year, which should only be 12. So that's what drove the average way high. We've since corrected that, but at the same time, it just depends on the projection of who's actually electing what benefits. So if someone that decides to go to a single plan, which the working rate is less than a family plan, that reduces the 50% co-share.
That's still I mean, you're saying that the 970 and the 272 represents about a 1 out of 13, whatever that percentage is, difference in totality? Because I mean, yeah, I get that you have fluctuations with maybe one year somebody wants the family plan and then the next year things change.
One of the things in budgeting for this is a couple of things that you want to do, because your utilization can vary from year, the cost of utilization can vary from year to year. And what most joint purchasing groups for insurance are experiencing now is spikes in utilization, primarily due to the weight loss drugs, Ozempic, things like that, Jardiance. That's driving costs for healthcare and utilization costs everywhere. Mass Municipal Associations Group, MIA, had an average of 14% increase in premiums share in, and that's the largest purchasing group in the Commonwealth. So you can have a roller coaster experience. So what I would do, what I did in previous communities, I would always build a buffer in to this budget. One, so that if you have an increase in a year, you won't have to have a spike in appropriation to cover it. You've already got a cushion that's built in, so you can basically ride the wave a little bit better. And if it doesn't work, or if you don't experience a spike or an increase, this is where you generate a lot of your operational surplus. And if you look at municipalities, where if they're generating free cash, they're usually generating it out of this line. I would get, I had in Norwell, I would get $500,000 sometimes out of this line. And it would make me look smart, but I was doing a bad job of predicting what the cost was going to be. So,
What I see too, to Sean's point, just doing the quick math on that, using the 13 months in your average definitely through
it's gonna
that.
whack it.
Just to give you an idea,
Yeah,
in 2023, the actual for our health insurance Medex, which is the retirement plan, the town's actual was 1,690,347. So we're using 23's numbers because we're midway through 24 to create the 25.
yeah.
So what ends up happening is we look at that, okay, we've spent 1.7 million. We have to look at what the insurance rates might increase. It could be anywhere from 4.25% to 7%. We usually target 5 because we can't always guarantee that we're going to get below 5. In some cases, it can exceed that 5%. So even though we know we have a bit of a buffer, that's why we budgeted 1.9, almost $2 million from the NetX plan, because if you look at that 1.7 spend, 5% increase is not unreasonable. You have more folks retiring, so you look at the pool of retirees, and they're probably going to have their spouse on that plan. So it's not just one retiree, it's 2 retirees. So we have to increase that to make sure that we're covering that 50% co-share. That is the numbers, that's the logic that we're using to drive that projection. So for 2025, it was 1.994. We didn't use 1.994, but we did use quite a bit. I mean, we had a surplus of 272,000. So that's where some of these things are being driven by.
And when the employee benefits and Medicare that we're talking about, that's for all town employees?
All town employees,
Including
that's
school.
town, school, and retirees.
Okay.
And the last thing that I would want to point out, and this is unique to Marshfield in comparison to other communities, you're doing this earlier in the year than most of it. You're setting your budget, you're trying to finalize your proposed budget in December. Most insurance groups aren't coming out with their number, their identified increase in premium share until January. Same thing is you're not getting your Chapter 70 and your unrestricted general government aid until the 3rd week of January. There's a typical time that House 1 comes out with the proposed increases for local aid. So your revenue, both your revenue and expense budgets you're being forced to predict things earlier than most other cities and towns. And you may want to look at whether you want to push it forward a little bit to give yourself more information before you.
What drives that? Is it a bylaw that drives that, or is it just past practice?
I don't know.
It's the bylaw that requires that the budget be presented to the select board by the end of January. There's literally, it's like last
You
month.
could still have it ready by the end of January and get those numbers in. I always produced it at the end of January.
That would take a warrant article.
No,
Change the
you can take a
bylaw.
warrant article. I think you could adhere to having it at the end of January, because the 3rd week of January, usually the Martin Luther King weekend, is when the MMA conference is, and that's when the governor traditionally announces House 1, and this is what my local aid number is going to be. It's also when the larger insurance groups will identify what their premium increases are going to be for municipalities. Those are 2 drivers in your budget, and just waiting until that 3rd week of January and then plugging them in and making your adjustments. It's a little bit of rush to get it by the end of January, but you can get it done.
Got it. Yeah, because, I think, trying to move the budget from the end of January, I think would be a.
I think it would get you away from the number of errata sheets that you have, some of the negotiations.
You're saying if you moved out from the end of January?
Yeah, if you moved out from December into the 3rd week of January, I think you'd be more accurate. You just have more of the data finalized.
Across the board, are you saying, or specifically focusing on these ones?
I just think that giving yourself a few more weeks would give you a lot more information.
It just means, to your point, that it's a little bit more of a rush on your team's part, and,
I think, when I saw the calendar that was being followed here, the first thing I noticed is you guys are doing things way earlier than anywhere else I've ever seen it.
But doesn't it make sense to keep the departments doing what they're doing and just hold back on the pieces that you?
Yeah, the final product can wait until the third week, but you want, I agree 100%, you want to spend August and September doing revenue projections. And then you want your budget, internal budget discussions in October and November, you know, you want them locked down after you set your tax rate.
And you can keep these line
And
items
then
open and wait
you
for
can
the.
keep, you know, but the one that, you know, your revenue projections you'd hold off on. And then you could tweak, you know, you get your budget proposals in from each department, but you could tweak them once you get the final
Chapter
revenue
7
numbers.
number.
Makes sense to do that, right? I mean,
It
just
makes total sense.
your other employee benefits line is just such a big, giant chunk of cost.
And it's becoming more and more
Yeah.
it's taking up more room in your budget, that employee benefits, pensions,
Right.
are soaking up more and more of your budget.
So we're talking about the three retirement, employee benefits, and Medicare, those three line items?
Yeah, it's really wherever you're putting your money for your health insurance.
You're kind of at you're at the mercy of the big insurance companies and
The state.
and the state.
Yeah, you're in Mayflower, and they should be able to give you a number,
Yeah,
you know, but, in January.
yeah,
Yeah, you're dealing primarily with one provider, I believe, one or two, Harvard and Blue Cross.
I think that's right.
Is that right?
This has changed.
Yeah.
So forgive the ignorance of this question, but Marshfield is 50/50. So do these numbers, is this the total contract, or is this
The town share.
It's the town share.
Okay, I just wanted to be sure.
The town share.
It's a good question.
Do not give up that 50/50. Don't negotiate that away. You've got to hold on to it, because it's saving you a lot of money.
Does anybody else have any other questions?
Well, just on that, we talked about this is what we should be doing, do we have to go through a specific procedure?
I will need a vote of the board because I'll have to do an actual journal entry for this.
No, I know, you need a vote of the board for the transfers. But you're asking about the process.
Yeah,
right?
I'm talking about, I'm going far afield, but you need a vote for this.
Yeah, for the process, correct me if I'm wrong, Peter, but that's something
It's
that,
internal to.
yeah, the town administrator can make
Yeah,
that
in my
change.
exit memo, I'll be right.
Okay.
All right, Rick, help me with these numbers. So
Yes, ma'am.
2,794,732.96, that's what's going to be,
No, so it's going to be the sum, the quantity. So actually, so the total of, so what you have actually two votes here, because you're taking $82,842.53 from employee benefits to HR salaries, that's one. The second vote is to take $975,544.34 to all the other lines. So in total, like, the reason why I couldn't have everything come from the reserve fund is because that request would exceed the amount that was in the reserve fund. And we had one that was a very clear, it was in benefits, it should have been moved to HR. So that's why I applied it that way,
okay,
if that makes sense.
yes, it does, thank you.
Okay, so vote one will be on the moving the employee benefits to the HR salaries line, right? The $82,842.53. And the second vote will be the rest of it, which is $975,544.34, which is moving that from the reserve fund to these other operational accounts. Right? Okay.
And the 2 million, I'm just curious, that 2,794,000,
That's actually, so that's gonna be outside of this because I just took I just used the reserve fund for these transfers. There were other surpluses elsewhere with other departmental budgets, so we only addressed the deficits.
okay,
But there are surpluses elsewhere.
which is what the 2,700,
The
2 million, thank you, 2 million.
Which automatically goes to free cash.
Yes.
That automatically goes to free cash.
Well, it'll eventually get there when there's gotta be some assessments or reductions, and once DOR signs off on on everything, but this will be
Okay, yeah,
part
because
of
they
the,
gotta go through their project.
yeah, this will be part of the equation, and it's a good number to have.
Okay,
So the 82,842 comes out of the 976.59 on page 2.
The 976.59, correct.
do we have any other questions on HR salaries or any of these other reserve account moves that we're gonna move on to for this year-end transfer request?
I'm good.
Everybody's good? All right. I'll move to take a vote on approval to move the amount of $82,842.53 from account 019125110 employee benefits to 011525510 HR salaries. Do I have a second?
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Okay. I'm not going to read off each of these individual accounts here for the rest of these. I'll make a motion to move that we approve a transfer request of $975,544.34 from the reserve fund, which is account 011325570, to various operational funds as listed here in this request. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Very good. Okay. Next up on the agenda. Review and discuss fiscal year 27 funding challenges and opportunities. So for this, I thought it would be good to just get a high-level overview from Peter and his staff on where he sees I think we know the high level, the answer to some of this. We already know what the movie is here, but what are some of these funding challenges as your team starts to look forward at the budget ahead? If you could speak, Peter, to the challenges that you see, opportunities, and of course, specifically speak a bit to the SSVT and the projected impact that's going to be coming into FY27 as you budget that.
Okay, I'm gonna hand out the rating sheet that Standard & Poor's did for our most recent bond rating, which gives a good overview of how independent third party views the current situation or financial circumstances of the town. And it is, in general, reassuring. As you're probably aware, Marshfield was previously rated AA+ with a stable outlook. It retained both the rating, the AA+ rating, and the stable outlook, which is good. You know, the challenge is that quite frankly, you faced in maintaining both the rating and the stable outlook. There are several. You're involved in litigation that's high profile, that had the potential impact of adversely impacting your funding sources. You've had turnover in executive leadership, and you're facing the same challenges that most municipalities are facing in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, which are daunting at this point. Reduced federal aid, increased, or still getting inflation pressures, increased pension liabilities, and healthcare costs growing disproportionate with your revenue. That's nothing unique about that in Marshfield. It's happening in every city and town. So nonetheless, they found that the outlook is stable. What you've got is consistent operating performance and reserve levels. That means that you haven't had anomalies or spikes in your spending, and your reserves have been maintained year to year in a good place. Your economic development and real estate environment is comparatively strong with in comparison with the rest of the country. Although there's been personnel changes in financial management, policy adherence has been stable. And so, that is good, and that speaks well of your team. The warning signs is, $117 million of outstanding debt, which is considered self-supporting. The positive side is you've been adhering to a capital improvement plan. The weaknesses that they're pointing out are pension and other post-employment benefit obligations. Particularly, they find that the funding of the pension system is low in comparison to other averages. It may be low. I don't know what they're comparing to, because in other parts of the country, they're in far worse shape. Use of an actuary in determining contributions is positive. What they're looking at, though, is the discount rate of 7.88% is comparatively high. A lot of retirement systems have brought that down into the 6s or low 7s. And they're looking at the projected debt of $154 million as for OPEB and pension, which is, again, not atypical for communities in Massachusetts. They note that the local economy is strong, that the financial operations have been balanced and maintained with good reserves, that had conservative budgeting practices, and those are reasons why they maintained a stable outlook. Again, they look at property tax revenue being strong, and prudent management. The risks, one of the risks that is somewhat unique to Marshfield is you've got 5 miles of coastline. They're worried about that because of the potential for property damage. The steps that the town has taken with municipal vulnerability preparedness and beach remediation, beach nourishment. I get a kick out of that term. It's just putting sand down, I know, but I don't see what's nourishing about sand, but it keeps the beach there, and it's been very successful. They note that, and
that beach is part of the revenue of the town. I mean,
Oh, yeah.
not only in beach stickers, but just people wanting to live in.
It's part of your property value,
That's right.
you know? And the fact that, and it has not gone unnoticed that there's more beach at high tide than there has been in years past. So kudos to you.
Good nourishing.
I just don't think of it as food.
Replenishment.
Replenishment, that would work for me. At any rate, this gives you a high altitude view. Again, what they identified as pressures are pressures that every municipality is facing. Consistent increases in both pension obligations and in healthcare that are outstripping your revenue growth. And growing faster than any other departments that you have in your budget.
So with, I gotta believe, and I'm not ready to do the formula, but AI has got to be able to look at the town employees in the past, in the future, actuarial things, and make a prediction of when we're gonna see that turn around. It's solvable, are we, can we venture into that?
What you're gonna see is pension reform on the state level, which will probably take one of 2 shapes. One, increased contributions amongst employees going forward, so that you're not carrying this step forward going. Second thing is if you sit at a Mass Mayors Association meeting, and that's where most of the votes are, not in these cities and towns, but in the mayors, their eyes glaze over when they talk about this obligation, and basically what they're going to do is go to the state and ask for a bailout, and that's going to come. And so there'll be a bond issue probably in the next decade that the state will issue to bail municipalities out of this debt to some extent or another. I think it's inevitable. The third thing is, the real thing is there's going to be a stabilization on healthcare. So there's going to be plan design changes, or you're already seeing Blue Cross, for instance, no longer will fund Ozempic for weight loss purposes. It's only for diabetes type, treatment. So you're already seeing insurance companies limit their obligations to patients in ways that they haven't done in the past. They're making adjustments because of the cost. So you're gonna see a moderation in those costs that will be plan related as well. What is unique for Marshfield, or one of the things, is the challenge in your educational budgets. You're going to have to figure out how to apportion what the new costs of the vocational technical school are going to be, and how is that going to impact the delivery of services in the public school system, in your own system, and how you're going to meet those competing needs. You've seen a trend that most municipalities have of reduction in the number of students attending your school system. That's demographically across the board in almost every community. You're seeing that more pronounced when you're losing students over to the voc tech. So there's going to, for the FY27 budget, there's going to have to be choices made as to what the town is willing to do to increase funding for education, for law enforcement, for fire prevention, health, public works, everything, and what they're going to adjust. So it's either on the revenue side or on the expense side that the adjustment will have to be made, or a combination of both. And you've seen mixed results as far as operational overrides in neighboring communities. It's difficult. So this is you're going to have to, I think the best way to approach this is to have a meaningful dialogue with the schools and start early on this, and with other departments as well, and see where you can make adjustments. Because you're going to have a holistic approach in how you tackle FY27. There won't be a federal bailout. There is more pressure on the state as a result of reduced federal funding. That will affect the ability of the state to address things. So one of the things you're also going to have to look at is, the town leaders, the elected officials will have to look at economic development and what kind of a contribution can be made in that area. Are there underutilized portions of the community that could generate more tax revenue in a way that doesn't detract from the quality of the community that you have? I think it's a time for municipalities to be aggressive in attracting the kinds of businesses they want in their town. You can't just wait for the market to come to you. You've got to go out and grab the good ones, because you're going to be competing for them. And it's hard to make a prediction in that area, because office space is in flux, retail is in flux. And the cost of money is high. So you don't know what you're going to be able to attract and what people are going to be willing to invest in. It's a very difficult time, and very challenging. So, you've got a revenue issue, you've got cost issues. There's a lot ahead, and the sooner that you get into discussions about how to address it, the better off you'll be.
Is there any projections in terms of state funding being reduced grant availability. I'm not talking about MBTA or anything, I'm just talking about general funds that the state has to be able to assist towns like Marshfield with different projects that are coming up, including the funding that we receive, that we spend on schools.
That's, you know, that's a good question. The one area that has outstripped projected performance has been the millionaire's tax. The millionaire's tax has generated more revenue than was projected since its adoption. To the extent that, you know, some other people, other than roads and schools and education, other people are trying to get into the game on that, you know, to get at those funds. But they're, you know, they were specifically approved, that portion of tax money was specifically approved for education and public works projects, roads as well. And I think there was a third thing, but I can't remember it. But so that might help with education. Other than that, I don't see any place on the horizon that will result in additional revenue coming down from the state.
Yeah, it seems like there, at least from what I've seen, it appears to be a potent amount of anxiety up at the state level in terms of, just from the recent budget that they went through, right, in terms of the governor. You know,
maintaining a hiring freeze and things like that.
Yeah, and also including the power to be able to adjust the budget and slash expenses and taking on that executive power because of the concerns about where things may go and how things may adjust, especially with the federal side in so much flux.
They're required constitutionally to make projection in October, I believe, as to whether or not they'll meet their revenue projections for the fiscal year. And so we'll have a better picture at that point.
Does that include federal aid?
No, that's operation or revenue that the state generates on its own.
Well, I think your recommendation that we start those discussions with the schools and do it together, right, versus in silos is a strong one, and it's what we have to do. This everybody kind of go off and figure it out on your own and then point the finger at the other guy and whatnot. It's not going to work, especially not going forward. I mean, our liability from the SSVT alone rose to about a little over $750,000, right? This
It's just going to go up.
But in a fiscal year 27, if I recall correctly, it's hovering around 1.5 million or something. It kind of doubles, right? And then it continues to go up pretty dramatically. So at a time when costs are going up in general, and you know all those threats.
And keep in mind too, you have that's the cost of tuition. Now we have the debt service that's associated with building a new school.
Yeah.
Which
Right.
is another, depending on whether they decide, level principal, level debt, that could be anywhere from 1.9, another $2 million in debt service, or another 1.6. But either way, it's going to be a significant amount of money that needs to be paid.
So not to start a conversation on something none of us have any control over, but I'm just curious with the school, and I still consider it a new high school, although it's 10 years old. 12 years old. Does it have the capability to switch some of the space utilization to the things that the SSVT is stealing students to go learn? Do we have the ability, and this is really a question for your son, and what can the school committee do to teach welding at the high school, teach auto body repair, teach electrical, plumbing, HVAC, you name it. Mike Rowe is out there on TV talking about how the businesses to support AI need to build power plants. We need power plants more than we ever have, and we can't build them fast enough because we have no welders, we have no electricians, we've lost all of this talent. And when people ask, well, where are these people who know these skills? He says, they're in 8th grade right now. They're in 8th grade. We don't have them, and we gotta grow them. So, I throw that out there, maybe
I
that's the
can tell
kind
you
of
the layout,
discussion.
the layout of the shop area, the high school probably isn't conducive to that kind of expansion, unless you did expansion. But one thing I wanted to bring back on South Shore was, when you said, all of us are, you said Marshfield's in a unique position, unique with the other 9 municipalities on the South Shore.
I said unique in comparison to, global, all 361. You're unique as far as you've got VOTEC on top of the other things.
I got you.
Not every community is facing a new cost like Norwalk, or like Marshfield is, excuse me. So that was,
For you.
the Wayback Machine.
Yeah.
The other comment was, on the education side, I think, I've been trying to solicit a neighbor of mine that's been an administrator, school administrator. We talk on the beach, and it says, you should be on our board, because you know the questions to ask when we meet with the school committee, other than, your son is well versed. I think our board needs to get some more comprehensive education side.
I'd love to see us join up with the school committee, for whatever, for those kind of discussions.
My last comment on what you said, Peter, was on the early on when you talked about challenges, you mentioned leadership changes here in the town. I wasn't sure whether you were saying that there's a learning curve there, or are you suggesting that we should be looking to bring some help or resources to our new select board to help them out or where they're having some issues?
No, it's more of a, what municipality or what rating agencies will look at is stability in your positions. Is there turnover? Has there been turnover? That will be, that would be a red flag.
You mean in like the town administrator role?
Town
as opposed
administrator
to
roles,
the-
yeah.
the-
Primarily, yeah, and what, during the written call, that's what they asked about was, okay, so you're an interim town administrator, and so what's the process for your successor? And and I said, it will be a competitive field, that we're hiring a consultant, that we pay competitively. And it's, amongst my peers, I think it is an attractive community. It's my endeavor to try to keep it that way between now and the time that we bring somebody in. And I think that, getting a good bond rating is a big plus.
Sure.
Maintaining a stable outlook is a big plus. If you're closing the books with a positive operational balance, that's going to be a big plus, and you're heading in that direction. So things like that. Challenges that you're facing are not unique. They're going to be inherent in any other community in Massachusetts. The one tweak, as I mentioned, is you've got a unique situation with the VOTEC. But if you pass, if reconsider the override, put that on the ballot, it passes, that takes a big chunk off your plate. And then it just becomes what's the cost of the assessment. And that goes to how many kids that you lose every year and things like that, from your public school into VOTEC, and then they'll assess you based on that number.
On stability, Megan, I know you've done a tremendous amount of work, and Sean.
And Meg.
And Meg.
Did I say Meg?
Yes,
You
you did.
started
Yeah.
He wanted to include you, Sean.
Oh, are you guys pretty clear now that our chart of accounts and our accounting and our munis transition is pretty rock solid now, because it's taken forever?
Let me put it this way. There's work to be done with the chart of accounts, but there's small tweaks. Because we need to make our object codes be more in line with the UNIS chart of accounts. I'm also looking at account activity, departmental activity, and trying to come up with account numbers that are more representative of expenses, because right now there are some that are just kind of dumped into a catch-all expense line. So I'm trying to clean up that kind of stuff. In terms of the improvements, the requisition purchase order system is working really well. So that's really important. The structure for grants and capital projects is super clean now. So, we can, because before, when I first started, there were no budgets on capital projects, there were no budgets on grants. So you didn't know if you were still owed the grant revenue, you didn't know what the balance of the capital project was. So those are huge improvements, like that's getting your arms around financial data and having control of it.
Good to hear. Moving in the right direction.
Oh, it's definitely going in the right direction. There's a hell of a lot of work that they're doing to get there. Anytime you convert financial software systems.
That's part of what I did in the real world.
God bless you.
Didn't take this long though.
I know, and it shouldn't, but the support,
6 months.
the support that the companies give isn't what it used to be.
Oh, and I said to your predecessor, I says, it's a simple thing here is, the longer you wait, getting your data squared away, the harder that hill's gonna be.
Yeah.
That's exactly what happened.
And you had a vacancy in the accounting office for a long time.
Yeah. I didn't turn over.
Well, thank you for that, Peter. There's no question that we have, to your point, we've got a lot of work to do.
Yeah.
A lot of strategic questions that need to be answered and assessed and worked through by the various town departments, by the schools, by including people in the town as well, right? The citizens just have.
It's important that everybody has a seat at the table because nobody's an adversary in this thing.
Right.
Everybody, and schools haven't done anything wrong or anything like that. Nobody's done anything wrong. It's just your reality's changing because your circumstances are changing. Stuff that you can't control is impacting you.
Yeah.
And so you can either sit there and let it happen to you, or you can try to get ahead of it.
That's right.
And control whatever aspects you can of your future. And define what you want your community to be. So the best way to do that is to have everybody at the table and be able to be heard. And, even if it doesn't come out the way everybody wants it to, have the opportunity to be heard. And that's what due process is, and that's how things are supposed to work.
I was going to say, I think that's to me, I think the silver lining here is that we live in a town and community full of people like this board and folks in town government like yourself that are working adamantly on trying to find solutions to these issues, and we will. I mean, we got a lot of we all go to the same supermarkets together. I mean, we can't run away from these issues and act like they don't exist. We gotta, we see each other every single day, whether we're grabbing coffee or food or whatever, and we're gonna figure it out, and we're going to. And we got a lot of smart, intelligent people that can do that, so which is good. The next thing in our agenda was to discuss the budget process for fiscal year 27. We kind of danced around that a little bit, but specifically the advisory board made recommendations back in, again, I think it was March of this year, in relation to the process and starting that process earlier. So what's typically happened is the advisory board doesn't actually jump into the budget process until the budget's actually presented during that last Monday of the month in January. I think we all sort of collectively are nodding our heads saying that's absurd. We need to move that back. From the town's position and from a finance and accounting position, where's the most kind of logical, relevant place for us to start, right? You can see an eager group of people here that want to get their sleeves rolled up and join in the fun. As you start to look at revenues, you start to even look at department expenses for fiscal year 27. And those bigger conversations we'll have to have too, which are more strategic, but just in terms of like the kind of nuts and bolts of the process, where do you see opportunities for the advisory board to begin to join in that and at least have a seat at the table, either witnessing, participating, or some variation of in order to be able to be part of that?
Well, we'll probably be working with somebody different than me. The biggest thing right now is the two things that are coming up is you get a special you know, that you'll be involved in reviewing the warrant and things like that. Looking at supplemental appropriations, things like that. Should do that, keep in mind, you know, whatever you're dealing with in the special, consider how, you know, is it sustainable into FY '27 and '28 and things like that. That would be your first thing. The second thing that the town has is you're setting the tax rate, and that's largely a function of, you know, the assessors, accounting, and the select board in adopting percentages and rates. Once that's done, I would always do a budget memo to department heads at that point. So it's either mid-November or early December that would go out, and I'd want, you know, their budget requests to be in, you know, probably second week before the holidays, so that I could have back and forth with them, and then, you know, put something together in January. But I would want their requests in, and I think the tradition has been, or the custom has been in Marshfield to have them come in earlier. And I understand that, you know, given the schedule, but, so maybe, you know, that budget memo would go out in October or after, you know, the state makes their assessment of whether their local aid and their budgets are sustainable for the fiscal year, if the revenue's coming in the way they thought it would. But, so October, November-ish, you're starting on departmental budget, or the internal process would start in. I think you know, there'd be updating of this board. You know, you could have a meeting to discuss how the tax rate derives, looked at. You can look at what the tax base is, and that can be informative. And then once the you know, the internal budget process is done, your inquiries would go. You know, would go. But you could a good time to look at projected revenues would be after your tax rate comes in November. So your heaviest lifting is going to be the special, and then after that, you'd start lining up stuff for FY '27.
Okay. My suggestion to this board is that in order to make sure that we're not winding up pretty much in the exact same situation that we always do in January, is that we start meeting with the department heads like over the next couple of months. I mean, not tomorrow afternoon, obviously, right? But maybe as we start to get past Labor Day, start to sit with the department heads, start to have those discussions with them now to understand the broad-based, you know, we spent a lot of broad-based issues, challenges, opportunities, all that stuff, right? We spent a lot of time bringing folks in during our last process, speaking to operational challenges they were having, certain things they saw on the horizon and whatnot. For us to understand those, individual board members to understand those, I think would be very, very effective. So that way when we're hearing them, we're not hearing them for the very first time, right? Doesn't mean that we have a say-so in any of it, obviously, but it means we have an understanding. And that gives us the ability to ask intelligent questions and try to make sure that as we're going through the budget, that the budget actually matches up with not just the operational realities, but with the strategic necessities of the town as well. Is it for me? I'm just kidding.
Sure, agent. Just call her.
Sean.
Like I said, your agent.
So, and to that end, right, I think we'll definitely, the advisory board should have a seat at the table, most definitely as we start to talk with schools and others within the community about what to do as we're looking forward on the horizon. I don't want us to be in a position where we're trying to rush that conversation while people are trying to wrap presents. I don't want to be in a position where we're rushing that conversation as Peter's trying to get the budget out the door, or Peter's replacement, or whoever it is, right? But we need to, but we want to get that stuff done ahead of time. I mean, it's common sense, right? The earlier that we start our process and we start getting involved and asking the questions and setting up our meetings and whatnot, which we don't have to do together as a board. We can, you know, Paul's assigned to DPW. Paul will go and meet with the DPW, so that way Paul's aware of and identifying those challenges, those opportunities, and then can come back to the board in a public meeting and say, hey, board, this is what I'm hearing, this is what I'm seeing, this is what I'm learning, and these are the things that we need to be aware of. That'll enable us to have, I think, much more thoughtful dialogue about the future versus that being rushed, which we always run into. Yeah.
We did, last year was tough.
In 6-hour-long meetings.
And so, let me just make sure I understand this. So the budgetary process for the departments start looking at their budgets October? Or are they thinking about like?
What's in the process when the budget memo goes out? Do you know?
So years past, it was a budget memo that went out with a form, and the departments would look at that form and they would put in exactly what they felt they would need. Recently, it's been more so me going through and looking at the averages because of the conversion-related challenges. And the town administrator would meet with departments to review their budgets. I believe the last budget cycle, we only met with a handful of departments, meeting with every single department because their budgets remained relatively static. There was a nominal increase, maybe 2 to 2.5% on the expenses, but the salaries were completely overhauled. We spent a lot of time doing an analysis because the salaries were just way out of kilter, and we needed to get back to what we were actually truly spending. The challenge is that's in a third-party software hosted in a cloud. It's not tied to Munis at all. So that required a lot of manual ticking and tying. So it took a lot of time to get to a more solid number on the salaries, and that's why you see a lot of variation recently in 25, because we didn't do that for 25, we did that for 26.
Okay. So then so I guess I'm just trying to get an idea of they're thinking about it, they're starting to look at it in October, or let's say September. Does it make sense for us to have discussion with them prior to when they're setting it
No.
doesn't, right?
I don't think that's what I heard.
So-
I think what Sean said is that he did the budgets.
He did, but if
I
they're
did,
going,
yeah.
but that's not how it's gonna be moving forward, correct? Right.
Yeah,
So-
I'd be very surprised. I think
Right.
whoever we bring in is gonna have a different approach.
You
so-
remember one of the I'm looking at our recommendations from March, right, is that all department heads should be included in and have an
Yes.
active role in the budget
Right.
process, because that was one of the things we heard from a lot of
That's
them, right? They were there
That's
saying
right.
they didn't feel like they were included. And then there was several comments from folks too saying they didn't understand Munis and they needed more retraining and stuff like that. So I think certainly us being involved too will help them, right, and bring these issues to the surface. So that way it's also we can help be a conduit to ensuring that those discussions are happening, right?
I'm just trying to get you're saying we're gonna start earlier, and I'm just trying to understand, is that appropriate to start in September if they're not even looking at it until
I
October?
think we'll catch them flat-footed and they're just gonna shrug and say they don't know at this point.
Yes and no. I see, if you go in, I think, on September 5th and you start asking the question, what's your budget for next year? And it's like, how much money do you need and whatnot? I think they are gonna look at you and go, what?
What you could do, my caution would be is you're asking questions, you don't want to be an impediment to their formation of their budget. What you could look at, which wouldn't take any time, is what have they spent the last 3 years?
Yep.
Because that's what the town administrator is going to look at. What's their spending pattern been? And then when they make requests, for funding in certain areas, you're going to say, well, you haven't spent up, you'll know what those numbers are. And you can look at, you can have that information available pretty readily. So you can ask, okay, you haven't needed that for the last 3 years, why would you need it now? You know, so look at the data and then go to the department heads, and then you're in a much more informed, you'll have a better conversation.
So
I
in
think,
September,
I was just, excuse me, I was just gonna say, having that data, understanding what the prior years have looked like, but also going in and meeting with the department heads to simply understand what's going on operationally. Like we've talked about a lot
Right.
during the first 3 months of the year, which is that if you understand, you don't have to understand the details of, you know, who's out on leave or whatever, right? But it's understanding the operations that are driving the budget requests, that are driving the financial realities of these departments. Understanding that, like a kind of just aside from the budget, that will be incredibly helpful because that enables us to ask questions more than just saying, well, this number doesn't match up with that number from, you know, prior year, whatnot. It actually gives us context and the ability to look at it from a colorful standpoint.
Just have one
Yeah,
thing there
go ahead.
too, because if I'm still in the process of building more accurate account numbers, you know, if they're making requests and it doesn't quite line up with previous years, and I think we, you know, the data will help, but more like an extra than looking at like your vendors and how it's done. It's not necessarily running like a year-to-date budget report or anything like that. It's to see like really where they're spending. A lot of departments have also been, you know, tremendously responsible knowing what their funds are, but that doesn't necessarily reflect, you know, what they may feel like they need to run their department, because that's what I've gotten as feedback a lot, is that they feel like, you know, they haven't had an opportunity to say what they need, because usually what I've seen with budgets is I have seen like a departmental request, and it's just an opportunity for the departments to say this is what I need to spend my, to run my department, you know, and then there's the town administrator recommended and then advisory recommended.
Yeah, the select board is really, you know, the one that is under your charter is the one that's responsible for it.
Would it be helpful to the board if a few of us, or maybe y'all look at me and say that wouldn't be helpful at all, if we had a list of like basic fundamental questions that you should be asking when you go in to meet with department heads, like things that you should understand, kind of conversation starters, if you will, right? Other than, hi, how are you, and how'd the year go, right? Because you're not gonna have much of a conversation if that's all you're asking. But would that be helpful at all? Is everyone kind of the opinion that, you know what, I know these departments well enough, I'm good to go? I'm just trying to think of what would help those conversations.
I think something like that is always handy, because what happens is you go in and you talk to a department head and you get into conversations and they're ready to start talking, almost like a therapy session. I mean, that's the way I kind of look at
Yes.
it. And they're talking to you about exactly what Meg just said. I've never really had input. I've just I have things that are important to me as a leader, or whatever it is. Great, you want them to tell you that, but I also think there are things we want to be able to walk out with, and we don't want to make sure we don't forget.
But I mean, and also thinking that important in all of this too is that there are a lot of competing interests right now, right? Like there's an awful lot of escalating costs. So I think it would be helpful to you guys because, you know, sometimes some departments, they may not be as vocal or they may not stand out as much, but I mean, you're representative of the residents of the town, and it would be good to see that it's not just South Shore VOTAC, but it's other departments, other things that are needed. And, you know, it doesn't mean we have the funds to cover all of it, but at least you get that full picture of all the things. So like if a department isn't able to do something, it's not them, it's just that, you know, there had to be an assessment and a prioritization.
Yep.
So they'll have the
Yeah,
opportunity,
absolutely.
I'm sorry, Jan.
I was just wondering from Peter what you've seen in other towns in terms of when the advisory board comes in and what you think are some of the better practices versus the less good.
So it varies, and it can vary, you know, it can evolve in the same town, it can vary year to year. When new folks come on, they usually want to see some sort of what is being suggested by Rick is a format. So
A structure, a process.
Yeah, a structure of a process where, you know, you're asking everybody the same questions, okay? So that your data will be somewhat consistent. what I've seen, what's valuable about that, and what Meg was pointing out is really true. These people that are department heads, 9 out of 10 of them are going to be very passionate and welcome the opportunity to discuss what they do, because a lot of times they don't get the chance to.
That's right.
And they'll tell you all about what they're doing, and it's fascinating to listen to. It's inspiring, like, you know, to see how, you know, excited, you know, that and passionate that department heads will get about what they do, and how proud they are of it, and they'll advocate for things that they don't have. So you'll get a real flavor for some of the talented people that you have working with you, and yeah, and that's to your benefit. But what naturally happens over time is you get more acclimated, and you don't have to rely on structure anymore because you're self-disciplined, you've learned this stuff. And so, you know, as an advisory board becomes more experienced, they'll stray from the structure a little bit, and the forms won't become as important. So I see that evolve as your knowledge base grows and your confidence in what you're doing grows. So I think it's a good combination to have the structure, but don't be afraid to be, you know, go off on a tangent too, because, you know, you can learn a lot from that as well.
Yeah, I think speaking for the whole board here, I think we all found that the department heads, when we spoke to them during this last process here, were exactly as you described. They're more than willing to talk, discuss, you know, including everybody that came in publicly, and you know, Chief Tavares and the fire chief and you know, school board and or schools. They were all very excited and ready to share with us and with the town what they're doing, which is fantastic.
Yeah.
Okay. So perhaps maybe what we do is at our next meeting, when we do a kind of a housekeeping meeting, really in the month of August, we can talk a little bit about dates and whatnot. But in the meantime, be thinking about the departments that you've participated in this last time. Maybe at the next meeting too, we can talk about who will be working on which departments going forward, right? So that way everyone knows that, and as we get into September, you can start to build those relationships. Try the best we can to keep the existing relationships where they are, to make sure that we're utilizing that knowledge that we already have within the board, but also making sure that we have fresh ideas and fresh questions and whatnot. One of the things Peter mentioned is that how advisory boards can, after a while, get a little flat because they just become, you know, they just built on, their questions become built on their experiences and whatnot, which is good. And that leads to very good introspective questions, but at the same time, too, it can also be very dangerous because it means that you just assume everything is okay, and then your board can quickly become nothing more than a rubber stamp. And especially to people that are out there in the town and watching and trusting that the advisory board is doing its job, they want us to be asking those silly, crazy questions that seem kind of ridiculous sometimes to ask, but those are the questions that oftentimes get the answers that we need to talk about. It's that simple stuff. It's not all the time complex. So. Any other thoughts or opinions or remarks before we move on to our next agenda item?
Yeah, so would it be putting too much on our town accountants or administrator for the next meeting to suggest a structure to put together a straw man?
I can give you what they used in Norwell, I think.
Yeah, we've done this before, and I think that I'd love to see what Norwell's done in other towns, but I think simply putting together some discipline around the structure will be good too. But yeah. All right. So the next anybody else? Anything else? Great. All right. So the next item on our agenda is regards to positions. So we have within our board, we have a board chair, we have a board vice chair, we have a board secretary.
Before we go,
Yeah,
can these guys be dismissed now?
yeah, they don't have to stick around. Don't you want to stick around? This
You haven't been at work all day or anything, have you?
I'm saving you money if I leave.
All right, well, in that case,
One
get
board
out.
is not gonna make you stick around all day.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Paul. Good point. So the board, like I said, the board has three positions, three elected positions that we vote on amongst the board, right? Chair, vice chair, and the secretary. The role of the chair is to guide, to set the agenda, to obviously help lead the board. Vice chair is to obviously fill in for the chair when the chair is not available, and to also take on that supporting leadership role. And then, of course, thank you, Meg.
Thanks, man.
And then, of course, the role of the secretary is is for meeting minutes, attendance, all of that. So one of the things I don't know that historically that the advisory board's always done every year, like clockwork, a vote and a discussion on positions. It's my position as chair that should exist. Not necessarily because we need new people and new roles or whatnot. We can continue with the same people in the same roles. However, I also believe too that we need to give everybody a chance. If there's somebody who's like, hey, I want to do this or whatnot, to speak up and say that they want to do it. Then we can have a vote and decide amongst ourselves whether or not we want to change the leadership or that position or put somebody new in. So with that, we do have three positions. Again, I guess I'd start with, probably start with the role of secretary and see if there's anybody interested in taking the role of secretary. Previously it was Dan Greer, he's gone. If there's anybody interested that wants to nominate themselves, or if somebody wants to nominate somebody else for the role of secretary, Mr.
In the past, I think there's funding in our budget. We used to hire a lady, she worked at town hall, and then they would come in, and I forget what the hourly rate was, but they would come in and take all the notes. So that the secretary position that's how they filled it. And since those ladies stopped doing it, it's not been that good because no one, really, there's no consistency. So maybe we'll put an offer out to find someone that might want to do that task. And I know that there was money in the past, always somehow in our budget to pay that person's salary.
Well, I think it also changed with the video as well.
Pardon?
Because we had to vote on minutes that she would write up,
Yeah,
and then we would vote on those minutes.
yeah.
And I think now with if it's recorded, you need to take the minutes.
No, you still have to have
Yeah,
minutes,
you
it's
still have
still
to.
legally required.
So,
Well-
this is a thought.
Yeah, no, well, go ahead.
Just a thought,
Yeah.
I think that we still had to have somebody in that position maybe to ensure that the minutes were
Correct.
filed with the clerk's
Yeah.
office, but Johnny's
Yeah,
right,
you're
we've
right.
all, yes, and Johnny's right, we had Maria Hebert, I think that was her name, her last name was
Maria, yeah.
Hebert, and then Jenna. Okay, and I don't know, I think Dan, I don't know what happened, but, it
Who was
seems-
Jenna?
Jenna was taking minutes for us for a while, and those minutes were uploaded.
Yeah,
They
so,
were on the website.
and Jenna and Kate are able to support us. But to your point, we have to still make sure that we have somebody that, especially if they're not available, right?
And we do have to
'Cause-
write them, don't we?
And that's right, we have to vote on them and all of
We
that
do.
stuff, right? It's not just a matter of just taking the
Right.
minutes, but actually voting on them.
Yeah, we get a copy in advance, we review them and then.
Right.
Yeah.
I'm not sure that we have a budget, at least if we
I don't
do.
know.
I
Well,
don't
it probably
know.
comes out of the town administration.
If we do, it's
In mine.
it's a very small
We were
number,
able
though.
to, yes, we were able to use that, however that is.
Okay.
We could find out.
A few dollars in overtime.
It was a funding source. I
Yeah.
maybe stated it.
No, I'll ask about
Funding
it.
source.
I'm not saying you're wrong, I wasn't aware that there was one, but,
There is-
was funding
I
somewhere.
support Donnie's position. I think consistency-wise, we need hacks compared to whatever.
It's hard, it's really like, I'm not gonna go.
You're not
I don't know
listening.
what's gonna
You
happen
can't-
here, yeah, you know, so I don't know if it, again, it makes sense that somebody just follow up and make sure that the minutes are ratified and that they get.
which is the role of secretary. So I will make sure that, that I confirm availability of folks to be supporting us in those minutes, right? But in the meantime, we still need a secretary. We still need somebody that's serving in that function that will be the person that ensures that that gets done, right? And that we get those on the agendas and whatnot. Does anybody want to volunteer?
I can do it, as long as there's somebody typing them up and all that, I'm happy
Sure.
to do the.
I second.
Follow up.
All right, so I'll move that Jan takes on the role of secretary. Second. All right, all those in favor say aye.
Thank you, Jan.
Very good. Thank
You were-
you, Jan.
You were my best friend for the
My
day.
husband's gonna be like, what? No, I'm just kidding.
All right, anyone interested in the vice chair position? I need a vice chair. We need a vice chair, sorry, I'm being
I think there's, I
I
think,
was gonna nominate Chris.
yeah.
I'm new. I mean, I'll do it. I just don't, I'm usually like to sit around for a while, but I could do it.
Okay,
I mean, I'm happy to do it. I think I could run the meeting if you were.
I think you could too.
Incapacitated.
good.
I think Paul made a motion.
Yeah.
It's up,
I'll make a motion. Somebody, you want a second?
I'll second it.
Second, all right, all those in favor of Mr. Rowland? All right, vice chair,
Aye.
very good, all right, very good. All right,
And I'll make another motion, I could keep you as chair.
Second.
Hi.
Yes,
It makes a lot of sense.
nobody wants to discuss?
No, it makes a lot of sense.
You got it, you want it, we want you to
You
have it.
transformed the board.
You did.
yes.
I appreciate it, but not possible without all of you, seriously. And I'm not saying that to try to sound nice, but we need people on the board that actually care and actually want to do the job.
That's right.
And that's the one thing that, well, out of many things, but one of the biggest thing that I appreciate out of all of you is that you're all willing to actually put in the work to do the job. You understand the challenges that we have, you're willing to support the community in that way. And it's a big job, and you think about it, right? I mean, we get paid nothing, like not a dime, right? How many of you get thanked on a regular basis? Probably not. So what do you get? Well, what you get is you get to know that you actually participated in ensuring that our town continues to be the best damn town on the South Shore, and that is that tradition continues forward for our kids and for our kids' kids. So that's the thanks that we get, right? So and I personally appreciate it. I have kids that live here, and even if my kids move away someday, I'll still live here. So,
Look, I
as
think you're
most of
adults,
us
and
all
my wife and I are still heavily involved in
Great
this town.
place
I
to
mean,
live.
they're gone.
Yeah,
I mean, they don't live anywhere. So I feel you. I mean, if you live here, it's kind of your duty to give back a little. You don't have to give back a lot, like everyone here, but I do think everyone in this town should give back a little.
I agree.
I think
Yeah,
especially
we need more of that from a lot more residents, though, I think.
I agree.
For sure.
need more.
Especially through your actions.
More participation in town government and state government and federal government, right? We need people to step up and actually participate. The world doesn't run itself.
Our elections.
And turning it over to a few select people, at the town, state, and federal level, and just, turning our head in the other direction, doesn't work well, right? We all need to be involved at one level or another. Even if it's something as basic as supporting our local sports teams or getting involved with, other community activities. That's how we make it. That's how we make a good town, right?
Are we still one short, or?
We're still one short. Yeah, we got Brian, so we still have one open seat left.
So,
We have 9, don't we have room for 9?
Yes, 9 total seats.
Oh, and Brian did. So to get back to business, we didn't vote on the chair, right?
Oh,
There didn't be one vote.
we did vote. Did we vote?
No, I don't think we
Oh,
voted.
let's vote again.
Okay.
Make a motion to retain Rick as chair as the advisory board. Do
I have a second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
All right, very good, thank you. All right.
So have the selectmen started interviewing for the position?
I know that they have open position, or they have resumes, applications that are sitting with them right now for review. I do not know what the status of that review is. I'll have to get together with the chair of the select board, Mr. Kelly, and find out where he
You're
is.
talking
in the
town
process.
administrator?
No, with Eric, so it's the select board that makes the choice, and the.
But you're talking about town administrator, right?
Position.
No, sorry. No, I'm talking about
Our
our
position.
9th board seat.
Oh,
Yeah.
oh, so we have somebody in front of them. We just
Well-
are waiting for them to discuss it.
Well, we have, I know, I'm aware of,
Sorry, I'm-
no, that's okay. I'm aware of several applications that have been submitted and interest in
now
the
I-
advisory board, which
Good.
is fantastic.
Yeah.
What I don't know, again, is I don't know where the select board stands on actually filling that. I need to get together with Mr. Kelly and find out where
So
that
you
process
don't
is.
have, you do have a role in that, or you do not?
I only have a role in terms of just speaking to whatever candidate comes through and, providing any answers or whatnot and, kind of giving my 2 cents, but otherwise I have zero say-so
Me
in
and
that.
Chris, it was just Lynn who essentially hired us, and then we went in front of the board.
Well, the select board has the
The
vote.
select board has to
Yeah.
ratify it,
Right.
right? 2 of the 3 members have to want you to be
But
in.
Lynn was the only one I spoke to, I didn't speak to Eric.
Yeah, and that's not atypical,
She
right?
was chair,
She's
right?
chair.
Lynn was chair.
Yeah, so that's not atypical at all, but the vote ultimately falls to the entire board to decide whether or not to bring somebody to the board, so.
So I don't know if Eric is moving well, I don't know if Lynn moved fast, but, he doesn't seem to embrace his role as the hirer of key positions in the town, or maybe he does, but I've heard that, the town administrator is still not moving.
That's why I thought you guys would discuss, because I'm very curious because I can't keep up. I don't even know who's on that committee. And I look at everything online. and I
Is there,
can't-
there has been a committee formed?
My understanding,
I was gonna ask that question.
we should have asked.
It's funny, because I was thinking about asking.
I was too, and I got.
And then you guys threw them out of the
sidetracked.
meeting. No, I'm
I got
just-
sidetracked without it because honestly,
I thought
they're not discussing it a whole lot. At least I haven't seen it. in-
But there was also, they're hiring a consultant, which may
They
be
are.
actually setting up the process and whatnot. So
Right.
Just kicking it down the road.
I think the consultant's gonna run it though.
The consultant will run the search committee. Will run the
I think
search.
that's it.
And that very well may be where it stands right now, is the select board's waiting for a consultant to actually take the steps
That
necessary
is
for
a
that.
good question.
But I don't know.
I thought the committee included some residents.
It's supposed to.
I
It's supposed
I
to.
have some questions about the building interview at that level with our current board.
I understand. They're supposed to be including residents of the town to represent all aspects different aspects of the town. They're supposed to be appointing residents. At least that's in the past, the way it's gone. So,
All right, our next discussion actions required by the board, I think we've already talked about it, right? Is anybody opposed to having a meeting, a short meeting, abbreviated meeting at some point in August where we can get together, approve meeting minutes, and also talk about the schedule going into the fall and talk about assignments for departments? Everyone's okay with
The
that?
sooner we can get it on the calendar, the better.
Yeah.
and I think, because Vin and I, we came in after, we don't really have assignments right now.
Yeah, exactly, which is why we need to,
Kind of
look
figure
at
out
that.
where you guys are feeling like you have the relationship and the history and track record, right? And
Yeah.
then the things you can feel confident about passing to Vin and I.
Yeah.
And me, I guess.
Okay,
Try to use proper English.
good.
I'm just gonna, this is a little off subject, but one of the schools, the enrollments, I think, I had 39 years as a teacher, so I know. And just until recently, everybody thought their kid needed a college degree. Now they're beginning to see that you don't need a college degree, you need post-high school training. And I mean, in the case of Tech, that's a heck of a school. And I think one thing that has struck me when I was up there are the number of programs for women. And I think that could lead, because there are several positions that if you go through there for 4 years in the cosmetology field, you're certified.
Mhm.
And that you make a decent living. And so I think more and more people are beginning to realize you don't need a college education. You have to be post-high school, you know, like vocational training. And it just isn't for the boys, because as we used to think, now it's women. And I think the schools are going to face maybe a bigger challenge in losing enrollment, because people are going to start,
That's shifting.
they're shifting and moving towards the vocational schools. And I think it's going to be a hard thing, it's going to be a problem for the schools, because people are seeing the value finally of a vocational education. And it's something that, you know, it's
Interesting trends we're gonna have to take a look
it's a
at.
change, it's a change in philosophy from, say, the 70s, 80s, 90s, where everybody needs a college education, and then you get out of school with a degree that doesn't have a job. What do you do?
There's a lot of
Yeah.
that too.
And, you know, the trades especially, starting to, you know, attract people, because they see, you know, I can get a job as a plumber and, you know, get out of there. I can almost be ready to be an apprentice on the money I'm gonna earn. And they get certified, they don't have a big $100,000 thing around their neck from college expenses. So I think that's gonna be very interesting to see how this plays out.
So to extend I'd be interested to understand how the superintendent, the school committee is preparing for, if there are preparations you can make for the
What
mega
can you
trend
do?
that we're likely to see.
Well, one thing that I think that we could do is a board, and I'd be interested to finding out anybody on the board that would be interested in doing this, is Mr. Kelly had a very good suggestion at our last joint meeting, where he suggested that, hey, this is gonna be a big line item expense, like who from our town is kind of looking over it, right? In terms of making sure that we really understand what's passing through there and their process and all of that. And that's a very fair point, right? I mean, you know, we should have some folks within the community aboard, somebody that's actually looking at, like, where are we gonna, who are we writing that check to, and what are they actually doing with it, right? And it's not insinuating that they're doing anything wrong,
The
just,
money is
yeah,
designated as-
just, this isn't 50 grand, this is millions of dollars.
Not just one person, you mean, not just like a project manager, but somebody that's.
Yeah, I think if we had one or two people from the advisory board that were meeting with Tom Hickey and making sure that they had like a good solid working understanding of the program, the process, the financial piece and whatnot, so that way our board can ask those people, right, that come back to us and say like, hey, how is it, or what do you think, or what are we seeing, is, you know, and whatnot. And it's not that it's not suggesting let's look over it because we think there's improprieties there,
No,
right? Just to be
no.
clear, it's more of just understanding what are we spending our money on, and how does it work?
That makes a
Right.
lot of
It
sense.
should probably be someone from the school committee and someone from the advisory board.
And maybe the superintendent.
Yeah, I don't disagree, but from the advisory board's perspective, it wouldn't be bad for somebody, I mean, because we control this table, right? We could certainly make recommendations to the school committee, but that's their venue to control. But ultimately, it is a town budget item, and
And it's going to be growing, and it's going to be
Yeah,
disruptive.
absolutely.
It's going to be in the 2.5 calculation.
yeah.
So I don't know if this is appropriate to talk about this or not, but I'm curious about, you know, economic development and how we have to, you know, he was mentioning the town as a whole has to take a look at what we can do, you know, tax revenues, businesses, et cetera. Isn't there, in a lot of communities, the tax base for businesses is different than the tax base for residential, right? So
The
like
rate.
Boston.
I mean, yeah, the rate
Yeah,
between
right.
business and
Rate between-
residential, yeah.
Yes,
Sure.
and, I mean, I also know that that impacts the tax rate for residential as well. But, I don't know, is that, again, this may not be appropriate, it may not be just food for thought, I mean, I'm just.
No, Peter brought up a very good point, right, which is, we spend a lot of time focused on expenses, but focused on revenues. And revenues is not just figuring out how much more we need to raise taxes.
Right.
You know, that awful
Right.
word, right? It's about
Right.
how do
Business.
how do we make sure that we're attracting and bringing in businesses, not just to line the streets with businesses, but get the businesses that we do want, that do complement our town, our values, our culture, but that also bring in the revenue
Right.
that is valuable to our culture, our town, our, you know, our folks, right, our citizens. So that is it's a very relevant question, and it is something that I think we need certainly leadership to take a look at.
Well, I think too, our relationship with the town has a very good chamber, very strong chamber.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I think they're very pro-business,
Yeah.
pro small business,
And they're doing a good job.
thoughtfully that way. Like, it's not just, let's pack in as many, let's not pack in as many businesses as we can.
Right.
Let's find the businesses
That we
that
want.
make the most sense, and that's why businesses like Levitate have succeeded the way they have.
Yeah.
Because this town has been great about that.
Yeah.
You know, and other types of businesses like that. But I think that's it, is kind of having an alliance with those guys and just figuring out.
Agreed. Yeah, definitely needs to be more like what Peter was talking about, partnership.
Yeah,
Right.
we're all here.
We're all kind of sitting at the table instead of silos, but we're all kind of working together
Right.
towards that one vision.
Great
Absolutely.
idea, and I was very happy to hear that the department heads will be more involved
Yeah.
in the budget process this year. Like,
Yeah.
I think that's gonna help.
Yeah.
You know, that.
I think a big part of that is to have good data to look at.
Yes.
Absolutely.
I think they've done a
Yeah.
good job. They've done.
Making sure.
I think they've
Well,
done-
and to feel empowered, like they're, like what they have to say and what they think counts,
Right.
right? That they're not just there to check boxes and fill a role, that they're actually part of the leadership team, so.
Looking for solutions.
Yeah.
Yes, they do.
That's right.
That's what I said earlier, I mean, you think about it, fundamentally within the town, we got great people, we got great town employees and, you know, members of the team, great boards. It's just a matter of getting everybody together and actually, you know, figuring out our way through some of these things, but,
Do we have any idea what's on the warrant for the special town meeting yet?
Not yet.
no, we won't for another month and a half.
Is it, I was gonna say, it's usually,
The warrant goes out, and I might be completely wrong on this, but Peter didn't correct me when I said it earlier, which is that the warrant, I believe, is going out like any time now, pretty soon.
is that?
And, well, they'll be looking for submissions, right, for warrant articles, and then it'll close sometime towards the end of August. And then they'll go through the process and then go through the select board to get it actually published. So probably
Right.
mid-September, we're gonna have to move fast and furious.
Yeah.
We will, yeah,
Always, right, even, that's right, we always, okay.
yeah. But obviously, as soon as we get them, you know, everyone's encouraged. And we'll talk about that too in August, right? It's like we wanna make sure we have a process that way. As soon as we do get them, we can start,
Aside.
we can get off to
Yeah.
the races quickly and not sit around and stare at them and not do
And
anything.
that's why I was trying to get a timeline, some kind of a timeline established, because did it make sense if they're not even anywhere big, but to have that data, you know, I think looking at the last 3 years, that's a great place to start.
Yeah, well, that's the warrants, right, for the
That's the
October
budget.
meeting, but as far as the budget's
Yeah.
concerned, I think, I mean.
The
we
budget,
can-
but the warrant, I'm sorry for the
Yeah, yeah,
special, we don't need that, right?
Yeah, no, we'll start that when we have it, right? Because there's really
That's
nothing you can do
right.
ahead of time. But as far as the budget, we, getting in front of folks earlier the better. Just understanding, you know, where things are, right? And going in with those pointed questions, and I'll help. And anybody that's interested in helping with that, so please send along your questions and whatnot you think that would be helpful, and I'll compile a big list of, and structure them, right? We could probably do it in some, you know, kind of similar to the way that we did it when we had the police department and fire department, et cetera, where we went through and it was very much like a
It was great.
operational questions, strategic questions, financial questions, et
Yeah, that's
cetera.
right, yeah.
That worked out really well.
Yeah.
So is there an article or 2 or 3 that the advisory board would want to formulate and push? Are there things that we see that need to be done in town that could be born out of this committee? I don't know that we have ever done that, but I don't see any reason why we couldn't.
No, there's nothing to stop us from doing that, but you'd have to have something that you want to propose that is obviously going to make a change to either a bylaw or this can impact funding or something like that, right? Or a change in anything that would require town meeting approval. I don't think that right now we have anything like that. I think that, at least just from my perspective right now, the question and the thing that we need to work through is process. It's a little bit of a not a situation, it's a little challenging for us right now because the town administrator we have is an interim town administrator.
Right.
So does he stick around, is he not? I have no idea. I'm not part of that process at all. I have no idea what's gonna happen there, but what I do know is that, you know, things will change. That much is virtually guaranteed, and so it's kind of hard to put together long-term processes when there's gonna be change coming in the terms of who's sitting in that office, and we have no idea what that looks like.
Yeah, and what their preferences will be and all that.
But,
Yeah.
well, one thing during our discussions that bothered me, and I can't remember what's Steve's last name, the member of the public who's very vocal, Steve,
Oh, from the,
town meeting and also.
yeah, no, I know who you're talking
But anyway, what he brought up is, as he looked at the funding that was in the bank at the, what is it, CPC?
yeah.
It was enormous, and we're a 3% town, and why are we continuing to build this enormous fund? And the reason that person representing said that we needed that was just in case land became available that we wanted to buy. And to me, that was like, what a silly reason to be taking money from taxpayers and just putting it in a bank. I don't
It
know.
also increases your grant level as well.
Yeah, but in terms of things like that, I mean, is obviously as a citizen of town, you have the full ability to go and
I
collect
realize
signatures.
that.
Yeah,
Do a citizen's
In the process of awarding those funds, if we only allocated 1%, there's a series of, when the state awards the money, if you put the minimum, you may only get the first round. If you put 2%, you say,
Okay, so there is a benefit to that.
But then there's a surplus, so if we are stay with a 3%, then we get the additional funding to do more things, and they never know when there's gonna be land available, for example.
And it's not just the land, I'm
It's not
sorry,
just-
it's not just the land either, it's about restoration of some of
Restoration,
our buildings that
Buildings,
otherwise wouldn't have the funding for those, you know.
Yeah, I
for the
realize we're
restoration.
using
Yeah.
that fund to
Yeah.
actually to suck up some capital improvements that the,
Yeah.
You know, I mean, this, look at the veterans, wasn't it
the Veterans Park, the Webster House.
the,
all these-
the Seth Ventris Library, all of those, you know. some of
there's
them.
still almost $7 million in that bank account
But
that
if
was
that-
not being used.
so I would just say though, as a matter of process, if the
It
advisory
will be
board-
used when the right,
if the advisory board wants to have a part of a meeting set aside to, as an agenda item to specifically talk about CPC funding, how that works again, how, like, the pluses, minuses, all that stuff, I'd be happy to include it on an agenda item. And that goes for anything, right? If there's something that somebody's saying, like, we should talk about this more, not because we're necessarily suggesting a change, but because it certainly impacts our position and the advisements that we're providing to the town when it comes to special town meeting, annual town meeting, then I'd be all for it. So if there are things like that that you think should be included on agendas, on the agenda, we can certainly add those. So that we can discuss it and, you know, and then bring in the relevant people that makes sense to come and speak to it, right? The subject matter experts. Okay.
That makes sense.
I move to adjourn.
Second.
Second, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Thank you very much.
Yes, that makes